Chapter 13. Late that night the boys made the journey to Windchaser's lair. As they feared, Windchaser's home was deserted. "Nothing's left," Hugh said, holding his lanterns high. "You took about everything that belonged to that other boy you told me about." "Daniel. Even the picture on the wall has been obscured. It's as if he couldn't stand to look at it any more." Raymond shook his head, desperate to force away the tears threatening to fall. "I still don't believe it. He wouldn't have left like this, not without saying goodbye?" Hugh asked. "Yes. Don't be so sure. I wasn't going to." Raymond looked stunned. "What do you mean?" "I didn't want to stay after what happened. I thought I'd do what I always do. Run away." Raymond was silent. He did not look at his friend. Hugh put his hand on Raymond's shoulder. "I'm sorry," Hugh said. The younger boy shrugged off Hugh's hand and said, "Come on, we're wasting time here." Suddenly, Hugh saw a glint of light in the corner. Crouching down, he saw a crystal that belonged to Daniel. The pocket watch Raymond's father had been given him lay beside it. "Look at this," Hugh said, picking up the crystal. Raymond bent low and picked up the pocket watch. He felt thoroughly rejected. "This is an odd shape," Hugh said as he handled the crystal shard. "Like a teardrop." "What difference does it make?" Raymond said, swatting the crystal from Hugh's hand. It fell against the rock and shattered. Raymond ran to the lip of the cavern's entrance and whipped his hand back, ready to throw the pocket watch into the ravine. But there was nothing in his hand. Turning, he saw Hugh holding the watch. "I told you I was the best pickpocket in all of London," Hugh said. "If you want, I'll hold on to it for a while." "I don't care what you do with it. You were right. Everyone goes away. Everyone!" "I'm still here," Hugh said. "Does that count?" Raymond frowned and hung his head low. With a wordless apology, he reached out and took back the pocket watch. The moment it was in his hands, he felt, as he always did when holding it, as if part of his father was still with him. They returned to the camp in silence. The next day, Bix approached Raymond as the boy walked back to the dormitories after class. "He's been seen," Bix said. "Windchaser?" "Yes, but it was far from here, and he's not likely to return." "Tell me where," Raymond said. "Please!" The Protoceratops lowered her head. "I cannot. I have not forgotten what happened last time. Where he is gone, you may not follow. It is a special retreat. The way is far too dangerous. I am so sorry." Raymond pleaded with Bix to tell him, but the dinosaur's resolve was firm. Soon they parted. Raymond felt crushed. As he walked to the dormitories alone, he thought about the previous night. He had to figure out where Windchaser had gone. Maybe there was some clue sitting in Windchaser's lair. He pictured everything he and Hugh had seen. That's when he thought of the crystal. He had seen a crystal like that once before. But where? The answer came to him at once. He turned and ran back to the training area. He found Hikaru wading through a mountain of scrolls. His instructor seemed grateful for the interruption. Raymond talked with Hikaru about everything except what was on his mind. He didn't want anyone to guess he was going after Windchaser, no matter what. After nearly 20 minutes had passed, he casually mentioned the tear-draped crystal that Hikaru kept on his desk. "This," the instructor asked as he picked up the crystal, "they are sometimes given as tokens of achievement when one becomes a Skybex rider." "It doesn't look so special," Raymond said. "Perhaps to you, but on Dinotopia there's only one place to get such crystals. Once a crystal is given, the Skybex and his rider must take a pilgrimage to that place. It is a special retreat called the Sky Gallery Caves." A retreat, exactly how Bix had described. A retreat, exactly what Bix had described. Surely he could find Windchaser there. Rather than shouting in triumph, Raymond simply shrugged and carefully changed the subject. Raymond knew that Hugh himself would be impressed with his artful performance. Soon Hikaru begged Raymond's forgiveness and said he had to return to work. "Arigato gozaimashita," Raymond said, conveying a proper thank you in Japanese. He had learned it secretly to please his teacher. It worked. "Domo arigato gozaimashita," Hikaru replied, with a look of happy surprise. Raymond left the training building and raced to the dormitory where Hugh was waiting. "The Sky Gallery Caves," Raymond said. "That's where he's gone." "In the Forbidden Mountains?" "Yes." Raymond delighted in explaining how he acquired the knowledge. "If I didn't know better, one might think you're cavorting with the bad sort," Hugh said with a laugh. "You're becoming a regular dodger." "He's there," Raymond said. "I know it." A ragged breath escaped Hugh. "Then I suppose we've seen the last of him." Raymond's eyes widened. "You're joking, right?" "No," Hugh said. "But we can't give up." Hugh swallowed hard. Raymond, I know this means the world to you, but let me say 2 bleedin' words. Tyrannosaurus Rex. Raymond spun on his friend. Really? Well, let me say 2 bleedin' words. Who cares? Windchaser's my friend, and I'm not giving up. Hugh stared at Raymond, startled by the force behind his words. Hugh allowed a wicked smile to spider across his face. Tell me something. If it had been me that run off, would you risk being eaten by a bloody Tyrannosaurus just to know I was safe? Raymond answered without hesitation. Yes. Well, Hugh said with a sigh, his smile not faded. That does make things interesting now, doesn't it? I suppose. So you want to break the rules, Hugh said, his eyebrows arched. Just run off without telling anyone. Forget the consequences. Yes, Raymond said. Hugh laughed. There may be hope for you yet, Dodger. When do we leave? Chapter 14. Tell me again, Hugh said as they climbed a series of rocks. Tyrannosaurus Rex isn't evil, explained Raymond. They're just hungry. Right, Hugh said. They're also not stupid. Far from it. That's the part I could live without hearing over and over, said Hugh. You can negotiate them with if need be. Really? Hugh sighed. I suppose it might help if I had something to negotiate with. I'm not worried, said Raymond. I am. The boys were 2 days into their journey. They had stowed aboard a supply wagon headed north, and were now well into their way into the Forbidden Mountains. It's getting colder, Hugh said, almost out of breath. It shouldn't be so dark. Storm clouds, Raymond said a bit nervously. They've been following us. Oh, good, Hugh said. That's bloody wonderful. I'm not worried. You said that. Raymond shrugged. He had read about a way to make a safe crossing through the Forbidden Mountains. There was a land bridge the carnivores avoided. The author of the scroll Raymond had found guessed that Tyrannosaurus Rex avoided the bridge because of its own superstitions. Ahead lay a rocky vista, gray stone slabs, sharp rises, and twisting paths that sometimes led in great circles. Ray and Hugh had packed provisions to last them a week. As night fell, they began to wonder if they should have brought more. Hugh built a small fire, and they huddled before it. The rain was still ways off, but the cold was now upon them. They had taken no sweaters or coats. Hugh was shivering as he said, You realize what we're doing is beyond stupidity. I mean, we don't know if a certain Windchaser is at the Sky Gallery caves, or what to expect when we get there. Raymond raised one eyebrow. What's your point? Before Hugh could respond, a crackling came from the darkness behind them. What was that? Hugh demanded. Probably not a carnivore. We don't have to worry about them until we cross the bridge tomorrow. Comforting, Hugh muttered. Another sound came, a twig being broken much further away. Whatever it is, it's moving off, Raymond said. Or it's going back to get the rest of the dinner party. Yawning, Raymond said, Well, if that's your attitude, maybe you should take the first watch. I'm going to sleep. You can't sleep now. We might be in danger. If we are, we'll deal with it, Raymond said as he brushed a handful of stones from the ground and lay down. How? By running for our lives, probably, Raymond said as he turned over and immediately drifted off to sleep. Hugh was dragging himself the next morning. The sky was a steel gray, the winds hissed through the narrow passages between the great stone walls surrounding the boys. They were moving slower now, the path had become more dangerous. The two made their way along the ledge overlooking the ravine. Both knew very well that laziness could get them killed. They tested the path ahead with extreme care, securing each handhold with serious concentration. Hugh's nerves were becoming frayed. You know, he said, Left Griffon had a saying, There's always more than one road to any given destination. What I mean, Raymond, is that there might be an easier way than this. Fine, you take us there. I'm just saying. I know, Hugh, I know. You don't think it was a saber-tooth, do you? Asked Hugh. If they still exist. Raymond shook his head. I doubt it, on both accounts. So what did we hear last night? I don't know. It could have been anything. All that matters is we don't want to have anything to do with us. Now keep quiet. I can't concentrate. That afternoon the rain began. At first it was a mild drizzle, then it turned into a torrent. They had navigated past the most dangerous paths on the cliffside. Turning a sharp corner, they saw a safety looming 15 feet away. The ledge ended just ahead, and it was clear, and a clearing was in plain view. An unspoken agreement passed between them. They could dig in where they were and hope that the winds would stop soon, but both of them knew that the storm was growing stronger. The situation would get worse before it got better. They had to keep moving. The rain seemed to slice through them. Thunder rumbled and lightning flashed. Suddenly, a sound ripped across the mountain pass, echoing one wall to the other. Hugh saw it before Raymond did. A boulder was falling ahead of them. It struck the ledge, then it slid into the wide space separating the path from the one on the cliffside opposite. The gap was no more than 20 feet across. Neither boy could hear the boulder strike the turbulent channel below. The wail of the storm muted the sounds of the rocks landing. Hugh reached out and pulled his hand on Raymond's shoulder. Then he leaned in close so he could scream in Raymond's ear, "This is crazy! We're going to get ourselves killed!" Raymond turned and shouted in Hugh's ears, "I can see the clearing again! The storm's lightening up!" Hugh noticed the rain was lessening slightly. "So let's wait!" "No!" Raymond yanked himself away from his friend, his arms suddenly pinwheeling in the air. He steadied himself and took another step. Hugh saw a great clump of roots jutting from between two great stones. He grabbed them for support and moved to follow his friend. A blinding light filled his vision. Heat struck him. A sizzling engulfed him. Lightning! The brilliance faded, and Hugh saw Raymond staring at him. Raymond's eyes bulged. His face was ashen. "That was too close," Raymond said. If we were in the clearing, it might have gone for the tallest object. Us. So we stay?" "You bet we stay. I haven't seen a gale like this one since the night my father—" A loud crackling noise suddenly sounded from above. Instinctively, Hugh reached out for Raymond, but the boy twisted and looked up. A mass of debris had come loose from the high rocks. Both boys watched as the monstrous shape moved swiftly past them. Hugh had his hand on Raymond's shirt as a gnarled tree branch of a falling tree reached out and hooked itself around Raymond's left arm. Fear tore through Hugh as he watched Raymond lose his footing and start to fall. The former thief held onto his friend's shirt, but the fabric ripped and Raymond was carried from him down into the crevice. Hugh screamed, but the sound was swallowed up by the storm. Chapter 15. "I haven't seen a gale like this one since the night my father—" Raymond's word echoed in Hugh's mind. He knew how Raymond would have completed the statement. "The night my father was killed." Hugh stood on the ledge of the mountain staring into the gray sky. He could not believe he had lost his friend. Why had he agreed to any of this, he asked himself. Why had he not left Skyback's camp on the other night as he had planned? "You know the answer," he thought. Hugh came because what he had seen in Raymond's eyes. He knew that look. He had seen it in the mirror enough times. Raymond was fiercely determined to see the Sky Gallery caves. Raymond would have gone anyway, with or without his friend. Hugh had come to keep Raymond safe. Besides, Hugh had his own unfinished business with Windchaser. Now it would remain unfinished forever. The downpour was letting up. Hugh could not move. He knew he had begun his long journey back to camp, where he would try to explain what happened. He had failed to keep his friend safe. Raymond was dead. They had come here, to the Forbidden Mountains, to Dinotopia, for nothing. Then he heard a sound. It came from just below the ledge. Crouching, Hugh looked out into the ravine below. An impossible sight greeted him. The tree that had dragged Raymond over the edge had not fallen into the waters below. It was large enough so that it had become wedged between the cliffsides about 50 feet below the ledge. The remainder of the fallen debris had created a sort of bridge across the divide. Raymond lay cradled in the tree's branches, horribly still. Hugh thought he could see blood upon the lad's temple. His limbs were resting at odd angles. Was he dead? Or was he still alive? "Raymond!" Hugh called. "Raymond, can you hear me?" Hugh held his breath as he felt a strong updraft of wind against his cheek. There! He saw Raymond shift slightly. His friend was alive. Hugh's elation was snatched away from him as he saw the entire structure holding Raymond sag sharply. The bridge fell half a foot, then stopped. The drop to the stream below was at least 1,000 feet. "Steady," Hugh said softly, worried to speak any louder. If Raymond continued to move about, he might bring the entire structure crashing down. Think! Hugh demanded of himself. There must be a way to get down to Raymond, to get him out. The slight break had come and the storm abruptly ended. Rain began to fall again. It was much lighter this time, but still steady. In horror, Raymond saw the tree began to slip again. A sound came from Hugh's left. He turned sharply, but could see nothing. It was a strange thumping and scratching sound. What could it be? Hugh was certain of only one thing. He had heard this sound last night, just before taking the watch. Some creature was following him, and it was closing in fast. Hugh looked around for a weapon. A heavy branch was lying nearby. Hugh picked it up and brandished it, hoping it would look enough like a threat to put off what was coming. Hoping, but not really believing. Suddenly a voice within Hugh began shouting. He recognized it as a voice from his past. It was the voice of selfish survival, the ones he'd always listened to back in the London streets. "Save yourself! The clearing is 15 feet away. You won't be able to help Raymond if you bloody well get yourself eaten." But this was betrayal. It was no different from what the bloke did to Hugh back in London. He had called himself Hugh's friend, yet he had turned on Hugh in for a reward. That was the way of things back there, thought Hugh, but not here, and not inside him, not any more. In a heartbeat, Hugh made his decision. If their positions were reversed, Raymond would have never abandoned him. No matter the danger, no matter the consequences, Hugh could not leave his friend. The sounds came again, louder this time, closer. A dark grayness fell before him, its shape obscured by the sudden curtain of rain. Suddenly he heard an ear-piercing squall. He was so startled that he dropped the branch and nearly lost his balance. An alien shape moved in, pushing through the veils of rain as if parting curtains. 2 reddish eyes immediately came into view, along with a beak the length of a man. "Windchaser!" The rain slowed again, allowing Hugh a better look at the skybacks. Now he knew what he'd been hearing, the sound of a 10-foot skyback's legs trying to tiptoe closer. "Down there!" Hugh cried as he pointed towards Raymond. The skybacks looked over the ledge and then drew back in horror when he saw Raymond's terrible situation. Windchaser's head shook violently. Then he hesitated, as if weighing his options. He looked down again, then back up to Hugh, cocking his head to one side imploringly. "What are you waiting for?" Hugh asked. "Fly down there and save him." The skyback's only movement was an agitated twisting of his long neck. "There isn't much time. What's holding him up may slip." With a violent shudder, Windchaser snapped. "Yes, I see that." Hugh was startled by the skyback's ability to speak. He'd been told time and again that no skybacks possessed this skills. "Was following. Wanted to frighten you both. Make you turn back." Hugh's expression hardened. "You didn't do a very good job of it, did you?" Suddenly, the shaking debris beneath Raymond shifted again. More debris began to fall. Hugh felt his blood turn to ice. It wouldn't be long now. The bridge would soon be crumbling. "We can't get to Raymond," Hugh cried. "All you've got to do is fly down and grab him." "No!" Windchaser cried. "Cannot hold him. You must help." Hugh looked long and hard at the damaged membranes of the skyback's wings. Some places were so thin they appeared translucent. Others were ragged and frayed, scar tissues from the burns Windchaser had suffered. Part of the creature's long right arm looked as if it had been broken and not reset before it had knitted, and the bones fused. Finally, Hugh understood. It was a miracle that Windchaser could fly at all. If the skybacks got too close to Raymond, he could easily pitch the boy into the abyss by accident. "We've got to do something," Hugh said. He closed his eyes and tried to think. "If we had some rope, we could tie one end to you and the other to me. You could lower me down. I could grab Raymond. But what would we use?" Luckily, the rain had stopped completely. The skybacks was able to rise in the air and fly off. Hugh waited, staring down at Raymond. When a squall sounded from the clearing, Hugh made his way off the ledge. He saw Windchaser nodding towards a pile of vines before he flew off again. "Well, O'Donovan," Hugh said as he examined the strength of the vines. "Just like the old days, climbing down from the rooftops, sneaking through the windows." Hugh drew the blade he had packed and got to work cutting and weaving the vines. Windchaser came back 3 times, dropping more vines with each visit. Both of them soon realized the vines were much too short. There was no way to quickly make a 50-foot rope that would hold the weight of 2 boys. "Well," Hugh said, "if we can't use the vines to lower me to Raymond, then we'll have to use them another way. I'll lash myself to your back like a rider. I've seen it done at camp. Of course they have bleeding equipment for these matters. We'll just have to make do." Windchaser agreed to Hugh's ideas of lashing himself to skybacks. Together they flagged down and tried to save Raymond. "These should hold," he said, testing the strength of the vines he had already tied together. He guessed they were strong enough to support his weight, but he had no way of knowing if they'd be able to take the stress for long. Also, what if Raymond added's weight was too much for them? "You'll what if yourself to death, O'Donovan," he thought. "There's no time." "All right," Hugh said. "Now you fly underneath and—" "Won't reach him." Hugh thought about it and saw Windchaser's point. Flying underneath the tree bridge would do little good. They would not be able to get at Raymond since he lay on top. "Your back to my belly." Windchaser said. A chill raced through Hugh. He understood the Skyback's plan. Hugh would be latched to Windchaser's underside, facing down into the abyss. His arms and legs would dangle, allowing him to snatch up Raymond as Windchaser glided through the gap. Of course, if the vines broke or simply came undone, Hugh would drop like a stone. "Let's get started," Hugh said, not wanting to think about what could happen. Windchaser said, "Not like you much." "Gee, thanks," Hugh said dryly as he tied one end of the tangled vines around Windchaser's thick neck. "I'll try not to yank too hard and strangle you." "Was afraid you—" "You were afraid of me," Hugh said. "Why would you be afraid of me?" "Afraid take Raymond away." Windchaser sat, his voice reflecting genuine grief. "Like Daniel." "Take him away? Like Daniel?" Hugh asked. "Daniel's dead. I saved Raymond's life once. I would never hurt him." "Not understand." "We have no time for this," Hugh said as he finished his preparations. The harness he created fitted loosely around the Skybacks. Hugh slipped into the harness. He drew the vine ropes tight around his body. "All right," Hugh said. "Now give me some warning before—" Hugh's words melted into a scream as the Windchaser took a running jump and lifted him high into the air.